Hi, welcome to our First Steps podcast. I'm Christiana, and this is my husband, Jack, and we are newlyweds, learning how to magnify God in our modern marriage.
In this podcast, we'll share insights and lessons along the way. If you are a newlywed or desiring marriage, this podcast is for you.
Let's flourish together.
All right, so for today, I thought it'd be really good if we discussed something we wanted to address in the 7 lessons we've learned in the first 7 months of marriage that needed some more time. It's the concept of space and grace. And these two terms are frankly saving our marriage, right? Mm-hmm. So it's as simple as this. Space is either an agreed upon or just a set amount of time where you guys, maybe you've had an argument, you separate for a bit, create space. The grace component after that is after the space is done, you come back together and you listen in a conversation with the purpose of understanding one another, not pointing fingers or anything else like that. So we're going to get into it today.
Yeah. This is a really great topic. We actually had recorded this in that lesson, but we just thought it just needed its own episode. So here we are talking about space and grace. And I am curious to hear, where did we get it from, Jack? Where did we get that concept? Because we cannot take credit for this.
No, we really can't take credit for
all.
it.
So
we got this concept from our premarital counselor, Dr. David. He's based in Jacksonville, Florida. Shout out to him. And it's been a transformative principle in our marriage. Mm-hmm. I think some quick highlights, we're more understanding of one another. We definitely know how to communicate better. And overall, I feel like I'm developing a more listening ear to you. Mm-hmm. So would you like to say some more about that?
Yeah. And you're also understanding what space looks like too. So
yes.
I feel like people can understand what these concepts mean, but to kind of bring it more into an actual strategy and practice in marriage, something that we'll dive into some examples of how we've actually applied it in our life. But first we want to dive into what it actually is and what it looks like. And so there's this concept in psychology called the window of tolerance. It's called the WOT, W-O-T. And it became popularized by Dr. Dan Siegel. And I was listening to it in a couple different podcasts, and I was like, wait a minute, this is space and grace in action, so to speak. So the window of tolerance is when we are, and I'll actually quote it from what he said, it is the optimal range within which a person can function effectively, manage their emotions, and engage with their environment. So that concept of being adaptable and resilient. And space and grace allows us to operate in our window of tolerance, because when we're outside of our window of tolerance, what typically happens is folks either go into hyper arousal or hypo arousal. Interestingly enough, Jack and I kind of also, we each go into one of those. So that's kind of a cool concept. And this is really what came about in counseling for us was, we didn't know this at the time, but in hyper arousal, it's when you become more anxious, more irritable and angry, and have difficulty concentrating. And there's essentially no grace. And so kind of airing out me, I have a tendency to have the claws out. And that phrase is what Dr. David had mentioned. And it's really because I'm desiring to have this connection. There's been a disconnection, a dysregulation between us as one. And so I'm like, what's going on? And then in hypoarousal, it's when you have those feelings of numbness. Do you want to say this one?
No, you can get into it. I'm just admitting to who's who on this one.
Yeah, because it's something I'm not too familiar. I don't experience this one as much, but more of a numbness, a disassociation, and disassociating and detaching from your emotions. And can also result in feelings of exhaustion and an unhealthy space. So we're going to talk about space even more. But and so what Dr. David had said, and do we even did we cut it out in that episode, our lessons one? But we did talk about like the leaving the building.
Yes, we did. In fact, cut that piece out. Leaving the building. I think the slang term for it these days that's like popular is disassociating. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, but we did cut that out in that episode.
Yeah, because we wanted it for like its own dedicated one. But yeah, so that's that, as Dr. David called it, the leaving the building, feeling like Jack metaphorically has gone. And where'd he go? He's here, but not really here. So
I don't know where I go.
And so it's a really interesting, like kind of marrying those concepts together. So with space and grace, as you were expressing, there's this opportunity for us to re-regulate so that we can both be in our window of tolerance.
Right.
And even like thinking about a window, when you have a bigger window, you can see more, you can understand what you're looking at. But as the windows get smaller and smaller, you have a harder time seeing the picture clearly. So, and that leads to these different directions that we can go in.
Right. And I think another important thing to recognize as part of the space and grace component is this is all about maintaining good connection with your spouse.
Yeah.
And when you do not have that connection with your spouse, you can fall into this dysregulated type of state where you're more just in conflict with one another, frankly, or maybe conflict's the wrong word, but not in alignment. And that lack of alignment will most likely lead to conflict. Yeah. At least that's been our experience. You know what I mean?
Right. So. Yeah. And I'm so glad you brought up the word connection because as I was soaking in what this window of tolerance means, because it is like a psychological term, but it really applies to scripture and I mean, everything. It's like scripture is...
There's an answer for everything in scripture, which is so amazing.
I know. It's so... it brings to light the connection that we have when we are walking in the Spirit.
Right.
And when we are not walking in the Spirit, what are we walking in?
Well, we're walking in the flesh and in a perfect marriage, right? And the most perfect marriage is like God with the church, Jesus with the church in a sense.
Yeah.
And a cord of three strands is not easily broken, but I think we can both agree a perfect marriage is not only alignment between you and your spouse, but also you as an individual towards Jesus as well in the context of your spouse. So, because God, we believe, is your first love and your spouse is your second in a sense. So, but staying on topic.
Oh, that is on topic too. No, it is because when we are connected to the Holy Spirit, then we're walking in step with the Spirit.
Right.
And so when you think about this window of tolerance, that's essentially us walking in step with the Spirit because we are resilient, we are adaptable. And so in Galatians, I love how it outlines the difference between walking in the flesh and walking in the Spirit. So Galatians 5 verses 22 and 23, but the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. And so all of that really just encompasses grace. When we're able to extend that grace when we are walking in step with the Spirit. And then on the flip side, so when we're outside that window of tolerance, we're operating in the flesh. And so the works of the flesh are evident. Some of them are strife, fits of anger, and dissension. And those really described being in that hyper arousal state. And so it just is so beautiful to see how the connection is, especially when it comes to taking on this practice of giving each other space and grace.
Right.
So do you want to add anything to that?
I do actually. So I think something that's really powerful about Galatians 5, 22 and 23, where you're quoting different fruits of the Spirit. In our translation, the last one it leaves out, or the last one it highlights is self-control. And I'll just go ahead and say this. Being mindful of your communication, your thought patterns, even your behavior patterns that you have as an individual, as well as with your spouse who you're devoting your life to, you have to have a level of self-control in everything. And I just really love how the scripture leaves off on self-control. It's like, also, here are all the good things that come from the Spirit. And by the way, the thing we all struggle with is self-control. And it's the last one. So I just really love that. So what do you think about that?
Yeah, that's so good. That's so good, because as you're saying that, it goes back to the definition of window of tolerance is also being able to manage your emotions. And that is part of what God has given us the ability to control, because we want to control. I'm just going to say, I want to control a lot of things, and recognizing that I don't have the control over so much, but God is so kind and actually giving us the ability to control ourselves. And so that's really what we can do. And we can control ourselves by knowing when we need space, and knowing when we need to give ourselves grace, and also extend that grace and extend the space. So I would love for you to share more about how we're applying it.
Absolutely. So let me be very clear in this. We're still figuring this out. We're not claiming to be experts, but we do want to let you kind of open the curtain and if anything, like kind of act as like a guide for, hey, this works for us.
Yeah, it was just such valuable information that we gained and gleaned from, I would say Pastor David. He did
Pastor
used to
Dr.
preach,
David.
though. Yeah, he did. He was also thinking about writing a book. So I hope he writes, and this is going to be part of it. But we'll have to hopefully maybe get him on here one day. That would be really cool.
Awesome.
Because he has a lot of wisdom. But yeah, it was just so good that we just wanted to share it, and felt like it was also really applicable because it's something that we haven't heard of before. So,
right. Yeah. And it's beautifully simple, as many things are. However, sometimes the simplest things can also be the most complicated.
I know.
But here's how we're applying it. And I'm going to break it down into the space bit and then the grace bit.
Awesome.
So I'm going to just go with this. Beginning with space. If you're an overthinker, understand that you are not the problem. Space isn't necessarily your spouse withdrawing from you specifically. Sometimes people just need time to process what's going on in their mind and their body. And they just need to be removed from all sorts of external stimulus. And here's the thing. If you're married, you are an external stimulus. And I'm so guilty of this with us. So, but it's really, I've had to go through the exercise of going, hey, like I grew up with a bunch of people around me all the time, right? I'm used to stuff being everywhere, noises, so on and so forth. So I'm not going to say I'm numb to it. In fact, I really don't think I am, but I just ignored it differently. And you didn't grow up like that.
No.
And it's been an adjustment for both of us. So what I found to be helpful for me, at least, did you want to make a comment on that? Or
yeah, I mean, I don't know if we mentioned it in the last episodes, but I'm also an only child, and so there wasn't a lot of like commotion and things like that. I had a lot of alone time, so I had a lot of naturally given space just because of the nature of my like family of origin setup.
Right. And it's just context, right?
Yeah.
Helpful context, because I grew up with 4 sisters. So there's a lot of moving parts. But going back to what I was saying, what I found to be helpful for me, like if space is required between the two of us, I like to attach it to some form of solo activity. In my case, going for a walk has been so powerful for me, because I found that while Christiana is getting the space she needs, I'm also giving myself an outlet to process the situation differently as well. Not in the sense of trying to overthink it, because by my nature, I'm an overthinker. We know that. And attaching whether this nervous energy that I have, or even anxious energy, to just a calming activity like going for a walk, playing disc golf, or going and shooting my bow, has been really helpful for me, because it's a naturally calming and re-regulating activity that doesn't drive me to what I'll call some numbing or destructive behaviors or escaping behaviors. One of which I've been guilty of many times in the past is eating or drinking certain foods to create just a sort of numbing or escapist feeling. Or another thing I've been guilty of is working out incessantly or pursuing some new random hobby. I was the guy that had like a bunch of different hobbies, and all of these were just ways of like trying to re-regulate and escape from a pretty chaotic lifestyle at the time.
And that's the hypoarousal, where you're doing a numbing, disassociating, because you're to manage your emotions.
Yes. And I think that's a great way to tie it in directly to the window of tolerance. Right.
Yeah.
But I'll end with this when it comes to space, for me at least. Coping is not the goal. Coping is never the goal. You never want to cope when you're giving each other space. The goal is to process. You need to process, your spouse needs to process, because that then leads into the other half of this, which is grace, right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Can I add to the space
please?
part?
Yeah.
Yeah, because I know for me, I lean more on the hyper arousal and can get anxious, but also feeling my emotions are big. And so, but I sometimes don't understand why I'm feeling a certain way. And sometimes where space is needed is when I need to figure out, what am I feeling and why? And also like what is God trying to tell me, or where am I trying to go out in my own strength or trying to get my own way, or whatever selfishness is coming up in those moments. It's an opportunity for me to say, wait. I don't want to, because he says, in your anger, do not sin. So like, I don't want to, it's okay to feel, it's okay to have angry emotions, because they're just signals at the end of the day.
Right.
But understanding, what is that signal pointing you to? And so for me, having the time to have that space, I like to journal. Journaling helps me to slow down and align my heart and my mind to what's going on. And going on a walk, I've learned that from Jack, I'm so grateful that you've told me that I can go on prayer walks, which is so beautiful. I don't know why I've thought like I have to sit in my chair and have my quiet time with my Bible open in order to be speaking with the Lord. And I don't need to. I can actually go on a walk in his creation and process things. And so, and we'll get to like an actual example of us doing this even just yesterday.
Yeah.
Where that actually happened. And so it just having that space is a beautiful gift to give one another, and to recognize that there's like a healthy level of space. And it's something that where we needed this was when in the beginning of our relationship, I just have all these like big emotions, and I didn't want to do anything that would harm you or that would create any further tension when there was. So then sometimes I would just leave. And it wasn't like I was like stormed out, but like there were times where I left and you were like, what happened? That's the unhealthy space. That's the space without parameters and space without boundaries that can lead. Boundaries are loving. And so in those moments, it was like, hey, like that kind of like cues your anxiousness. The anxious attachment comes out, and it's like, where did my spouse go? And where I'm just like, I don't want to say anything. I just need like time to breathe. And yeah.
Yeah. And can I add some context to that as well? That was a wonderful example. I'm actually really glad you brought that up. We did mention this in the 7 lessons in the first 7 months of marriage, but when we got married, we lived in 2 different places.
Yeah, we didn't even mention that. Yeah.
We lived in 2 different places before we got married. We didn't live together until after we got married, and I actually moved in with Christiana. So I packed all my things, put the rest in a storage unit, and just kind of invaded her life at the end of the day. Like it felt like that, but all of a sudden our beautiful little 1-bedroom apartment, 800-ish square feet, now had 2 people in it with 1 bathroom. And
I feel like it had to have been smaller. It really felt
smaller.
The more stuff we put in it, it felt smaller, but yeah.
And we both worked from home. So like it was like bedroom and then main living area / kitchen /
workspace, creative space. It was just space on top of space. So it was,
we were on top of each other basically.
Literally.
And it was difficult to get space. And in those times is when honestly, it was a challenge for both of us.
Yeah.
Like, and going back to what you mentioned about you just needed to leave because you didn't want to hurt my feelings or say something unkind. And I also kind of walled up and became hypo, so to speak, where like I disassociated, just like, okay, let me just be quiet. Everything's fine. Like kind of avoiding all the tension, if you will. And tension's an important word, by the way.
Yeah.
What you would walk out the door, and with space, I find it's really helpful if we just say something like, hey, like I need 30 minutes, giving some form of context to the space time between us. Cause at the time she just walked out the door. I didn't know where she was going and things didn't feel good between us. And when you're a newlywed, like things don't feel good sometimes. And
I know. And I think I wasn't out for long. I think I went to go get the mail at one point.
Right.
And I didn't think I was out for a long time, but that's because I felt like I was like in this, just trying to process everything. But also not living together, I hadn't learned what it was like to like be one and to communicate in a way, because my time is now being shared with you. And so communication kind of ties in.
Right. So it was just a very unique time for us, and we're quite a bit happier now that we have a slightly larger space.
Yeah.
And it gives us like, there's the ability for us to cultivate space within our home rather than leaving the home. So that's been really helpful.
Yeah. Even though we still need to practice it, just like even yesterday, having more space physically, we still have to put this into practice because if tension's there, tension is there, even if you are in two different rooms. And so it's that disconnection. Disconnection. So yeah.
Right. You can be 6 inches apart, but 6 miles away in your mind. Yeah. So here, let's go jump into the other half of this.
Okay. Yeah.
Which is grace, right? Grace is such a beautiful, powerful thing. It's like a key component of love. It's something we're both working on for one another in different areas, right? But I found that grace runs in tandem with forgiveness. Not wanting to forgive in the moment, I think, is okay. Like, it's good to understand your emotions. It's good because emotions are not bad. They're signals, right? Like what you said. And not wanting to forgive in the moment can be okay, but ultimately you need to have a desire to forgive and be working towards forgiveness, because you can't build a successful relationship on unforgiveness. It's just not going to work. It's going to fall into like scorekeeping, contempt, stonewalling, all of these critical things that frankly lead to just not a thriving marriage from what we've read. Yeah. And it's really important. So we're learning forgiveness for one another, even still. I mean, we're still not a year into this thing.
Yeah.
And I don't know. It's been great though, because we've been going to some really awesome classes called Re-Engage, and that's been super helpful for us.
Yeah, Grace had a dedicated chapter, dedicated lesson, but then Forgiveness had a dedicated one, Making Amends. I mean, all of it. But I love how you say that grace is really the pathway to forgiveness, or forgiveness is the pathway to grace. That's beautiful.
Oh, thanks, my love. So.
That is beautiful.
Another thing to go with that grace and forgiveness thing, though, is, and this goes back to the scripture that you read, the fruit of the Spirit.
Yes.
In Galatians 5:22, love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. This is about self-control. Do not be reactive when it comes to grace. Consider your thoughts and actions in the context of the current situation. Work on your own emotional control and regulation, because we found that, we can be spilling our hearts out to one another, right? Like we can, and it's like stuff that maybe happened in childhood or earlier in our life, but maybe something you've done or I did, it just pokes at a wound from way back when.
Yeah.
And don't add fuel to that fire, right? Like approaching each other in care and love. So what would you say about that?
Yeah, that's beautiful. I was just thinking of Galatians, and grace is embodying kindness and gentleness and self-control and forgiveness. It's like encompassing all of that. And I mean, the Lord has shown us amazing grace, and it's who are we to withhold that? And that's something I'm really working on, working through, especially in our marriage. Because I think I talked about this in our Reengage group, but I hold myself to such a high standard. And so I'm not giving myself grace. And then I extend that to you. And so then there's this high bar. And so then grace isn't given. And so it's making sure that you are responding, not reacting. And that space can give you the opportunity to then respond in grace versus reacting in the flesh.
Well said. Really well said. And my final point on this, honestly, y'all, just listen with intention. Like, kind of ties in with what I just said. Listen with intention. Don't leave the building. Don't try to defend yourself or explain away, or what's another mean? It's not demean, dismiss. That's what it is. Don't try to make excuses for yourself or dismiss your spouse's feelings. Like, I'm super guilty of this. And it doesn't, you want to be that safe space for your spouse, right? And you want to make sure that, like, you want to feel heard and listened to. Your spouse does too.
Yeah. So I like you said the word intention, because with grace, I can kind of speak from mine, because grace is something Jack extends so much grace to me every day, billion times a day. And so you've really shown me that. And this is an area I'm really growing in, and just like with space on your end. So it's this, so we both kind of each are carrying one of those. But when it comes to grace for me with intention, it's also in my mind, I have to pause and say, Jack has good intentions. He's not trying to hurt me in this situation. Like you said, it could be poking at an old wound, and being able to pause and say, okay, Jack's human, I'm human. We all are not perfect, for all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. There's nobody perfect except Jesus. And so recognizing that, I think, like, once we understand, in speaking for myself specifically, that I'm not perfect, you're not perfect. And so why would I expect you to do something a certain way, or withhold that grace? Because grace is understanding that we're human, and understanding that we are forgiven, and we can walk as saved sinners. And so, I really, for me, learning to walk in grace is pausing, taking a moment, checking in, and saying that you have good intentions, you are human. And also something that you've taught me, because some of the things that we talked about in those lessons is how can we love and serve each other better? And so giving each other that roadmap, something that you said to me that I want to put into practice more is, before I say something, I know you're like, where is she going with this? Before I say something, pause and say, how would this feel if Jack were to say it to me? Wow. I mean, you're the one that told me about that.
And I'm also very forgetful, so this is new to me.
It's also not in our notes too. It's just funny. It's just coming to me. But it is, I mean, when you think about that, that's an opportunity to be like, yeah, no, I'm going to give you grace in this moment. Like, I wouldn't want to be talked to like that. That's so mean. So I love that. And I'm grateful that you gave me that roadmap. And I feel like that should just be applied to every conversation, every person. And it's like, treat others how you want to be treated. The golden rule. But how hard can that sometimes be? So,
extremely. It can be. I mean, and I think another thing too is like, and this is unique to our situation. We're both very hard on ourselves at all accounts. So just recognizing that, and then even having grace for that, like I can be my own like the voice in my head is my own worst enemy sometimes. And we've had conversations, and that's the same for you too.
Yeah. Yeah. But speaking of conversations, can we talk about our example from yesterday?
Let's get into it.
Yeah.
This is like real time. It's one of those moments where it's like you're talking about something that you're learning about, and then the situation that necessitated you learning about that thing happened.
Yeah. So. I felt like the Lord was like, you guys are going to be talking about this. I'm going to give you an example that's so fresh in your mind to talk about with everybody.
I know.
So it was good.
Thank you, Lord. You have stirred up conflict in our hearts.
He doesn't stir up conflict.
No, he doesn't. He doesn't.
But he does test us.
Yes.
So we got tested yesterday.
We did.
And I think we passed. It's not about passing.
I think we did. Well, you forgave me. I forgave you. We passed.
Right? Yeah. Well, okay. You brought up the word tension.
Yes.
Do you want to?
Oh, I can start it out.
Yeah, sure.
So awesome. So we have a really awesome practice, I think, and feel free to take this. Like, can't take credit for it. We call it Fam Jam. And Fam Jam is like our bi-weekly meeting. It's 30 minutes to an hour. We just talk logistics, right? We found that, it's so easy to make everything in your day about logistics. What do you want to eat for dinner? Where do you want to go on a date? Or is this bill paid, et cetera? So we kind of put all those things, put it on a list, and we talk about it end of the week, typically.
Yeah, specific time of day dedicated to it, having the boundary around it. And we did talk about that in those first two episodes. So be sure to look back and check those out because it dives more into this too. So yeah.
Yes. And while we were in the midst of Fam Jam, we came upon a sore subject between the two of us. Like we know it's a sore subject. So again, having some level of awareness is helpful, right? So the sore subject comes up, and it's not like we haven't had discussions about it before, and we've definitely worked through it. It's not as bad as it used to be for us. And for whatever reason, this is one of those moments where I think the wound was getting poked at a bit from like past times. And I was the one instigating the conversation, and all of a sudden I just felt this nudge in my heart. I felt tension, like my chest started getting tight. I started to feel flustered. And like for me, when I'm stressed, I get a headache. So, and I just felt all those things, and your body language also changed. So I'm like, okay, something that you have asked me to do is like, Jack, if there's tension between us, please just call it out. And so
call out the elephant in the room.
Yep. So I took a bold step of faith. Right. Because like I'm conflict avoidant. I don't like conflict. That's just, I don't know anyone who does.
I don't. Yeah.
So, but took a bold step, and I'm just like, hey, my love, I feel some tension around this. Do we want to talk about this for a sec and take like put all this away? Let's talk about this tension for a second.
Yeah.
So,
and thank you for framing that one up there. I was so glad that you did, because I was like, yeah, you're right. There is tension. And I also feel like maybe now isn't the time, because I want to figure out why, because I didn't even know why I was feeling that. I was feeling it. And mind you, like earlier before during the day, we went to the farmer's market. We grabbed coffee. We walked around with the sunshine on our face and the flowers blooming, and it was slow and beautiful. Like there was definitely a difference in the feelings we felt then versus in that moment of feeling the tension. So it's not like we're always going through tension.
No, not at all.
We're highlighting the specific moment. And so in that time, we had said, okay, like let's talk about it. Maybe not in this present moment, but let's talk about it today. Because we also had our date planned and scheduled for the day as well, which we also talk about in the last episode. So this is all like playing. We are trying to practice what we are preaching here. And so, because I'm like, I want to go on this date. I don't want to wait longer, but like also need to process these emotions.
Right.
So Jack needed to get the car washed because it's pollen season right now. And it's lovely. It's snowing pollen, which I'm okay. I'm here for because the flowers are beautiful. But I think I had gone upstairs and I said, hey, honey, like, maybe now's a good time for you to go get the car washed.
Well, and I think another thing, not to interrupt, but this is important to say, because our earlier example where we were in our 1-bedroom apartment, Christiana just left, went to go get the mail and didn't tell me anything. The situation almost happened again, that same type of like you just leaving, not giving me a heads up. But what was so helpful and powerful for me was just like, you took a moment to excuse yourself and used language like, hey, I just need some time to figure out what's going on in my soul. And that helped me so much. And I just want to say thank you for doing that, because it, like, I felt the tension and I'm just like, I don't like this. And, but it was so helpful because like it gave me time to like go do a nourishing activity, which is for me, I like having a clean car. Like it's mine. I like to take care of it, but I also want to make sure like you and I are good before I go and do something else, because the tension was our connection not being in alignment with one another.
We got disconnected. So. Disconnected. Yeah. Well, thank you for saying that, because this also goes to, in practicing space and grace, it's recognizing, okay, let me call out that I need space and that it's okay. But to call it out is not a bad thing. I think at first, like, I was afraid to say like, I need space, because I didn't want you to think that I needed space away from you. It was more of, I actually needed space to figure out what was going on in my heart and my mind. Right. So that I can step back into our time together and not, rupture anything or have to repair anything. So I did say like, hey, I think this is a great time. I'm going to journal, I'm going to process. And then like, I may go on a walk and just like, let you know. So, and you had said, well, hey, let me know when you're coming back, or just like, give me a heads up, communicate during that time of space. And so I did. I was like, hey, honey, I'm going on my walk. Like, you're like, come on back. Like, I'm, ready to talk, like that sort of language.
Yes. Yeah. And it was helpful for me because sometimes your spouse just has their emotions all over them and you're just like, ooh, gotta give you some space. And at the time, like, I think I've grown in this. I still have much to grow in, but, because of my new understanding of space, or my developing understanding of space, I'll say that you can say, hey, I need some space, and it doesn't trigger like the cascade of anxious or nervous emotions that I feel. Yeah. And hopefully you notice that. I feel like it does. I feel like I've changed a little bit, but still work in progress. We
both are. Yeah. We'll continue to be works in progress. But yeah, it was really good, because then I was able to figure out what was going on in me. And then I could communicate it more clearly, right? Because you mentioned you're an overthinker. I'm an external processor. So like, I can just keep rambling and keep talking, trying to figure it out. And then in the process, Jack's like, what is going on? What are you saying? Yeah. And so I really wanted to collect my thoughts and then reconvene and have the opportunity to give Jack grace as well in how I was communicating, and also give myself grace for it as well. So it was honestly so beautiful, because as we were talking, I felt the tension leaving. Me too. And I'm grateful to God for that, and grateful that we have had the opportunity to learn these things about one another. Yeah. Like we're both in this for the long haul. We hope you are too. Right. Yeah. And you got to try. It's going to be hard and it's going to be painful at times, but it's the windshield's better than the rear view mirror in that sense. And, but yeah, I'm just really grateful for you. Likewise. And so, when we were doing the lesson for grace, I also was looking up different things to say, because if anyone's like me, sometimes you just don't know what to say. And just to be clear, I feel like I can get a little vague in communicating. And so I'm really working on improving that. But one of the things that I want to try to put into practice more is the phrase of can we revisit this when I'm calmer? I didn't say those exact words yesterday, but I was like, hey, this doesn't feel like a good time to talk about this because I don't know what's going on like inside of me. So like, can we put a pin in it?
Yes.
And that's kind of like been our language, has been very helpful for both of us in many situations. And I feel like that's going to be helpful for folks who have children too, because both of us have learned how conflict is handled through our upbringing too. And so having different phrases to say to be kind to one another, to not like get the claws out. This has helped me a lot to not like bring the claws out, just like a cat. Like I know it sounds so funny, but cats, they just want to be, some of the cats just want to be close to you, but like there's really that desire to be connected again, but it could come off as being intense. So
right, the claws come out to grab, and take hold or control, of the connection in a way. So
before yesterday, there was an example I had prepared, so I just wanted to like briefly highlight that one too, because I think like on the flip side, that was an example of when the tension was rising. Another situation happened when it didn't even have anything to do with both of us, but it was just like it was a day at work. You just had a day. And I think you were trying to just process so much. And especially working from home, there isn't that transition time. So I saw you on the couch and I was about to go for a walk, but like it looked like something was going on with you, but it also looked like you left the building. So I was like, hey, honey, I'm noticing something on you, or what's going on. Do you want me to be here to help process, or do you want to have the space to process it on your own? Because I'm going to go for a walk. And you paused and you said, yeah, I think processing it on my own would be good. Like you can go for a walk. And so I was like, okay. So I went for a walk and then I came back and then we talked and you got to like tell me what was going on. But it was a really great opportunity for me, because in those moments I can go into the negativity, negatively interpreting, being like, what did I do? What happened? What's going on with Jack? Why is he feeling this way? And then naturally in the past, my claws would come out, or being like, I would get the irritableness with irritability. And instead I was like, wait a minute. Okay, Jack, there's something going on. It may or may not have to do with me. Let me ask, and then like see what he needs in this moment. Do you remember that? It was a little bit ago.
It was a little bit ago, and I forget the context, and I don't know if I said what I'm about to say in the moment, but I am going to say it now. Did I tell you that it didn't have to do with you? Did I specify that? Do you remember?
I did ask. I said, hey, like, is everything okay? Is everything okay between us? And you said, yes, it's work and I just need to like process stuff with that, but it's not you.
Yes. And that's just something I want to highlight real quick. Like if you see that, if you know you need space to process something, or if you are on the receiving end of that, it's helpful, at least I think, to say, hey, doesn't have to do with you, or maybe it does have to do with you. Mm-hmm. And just giving some context to allay some initial nervousness, if you will.
Yeah.
But
yeah. Do you have any other examples that would come to mind, or how we're applying it?
I think the biggest thing, honestly, is understanding how you process and how your spouse processes. For Christiana, as she's mentioned, she's a external processor. I do externally process, but I would say I'm not as much of an external processor as you are. Yeah. So how my processing works is I'll receive information throughout the day, work, our relationship, etc., and it will just kind of stew in here, because I really try to think about the words that come out of my mouth. I really do. May not seem like it sometimes. I think I said professionalism.
Yeah, and I totally missed it.
Yeah. So in our first episode, I tried to say professionalism and it came out as professionism. But
And I
Anyway.
totally just was like, okay, what's the next thing we're going to say? What is the next thing we're talking about?
And so I internally process, and to her, it can seem like I may be leaving the building a little bit.
Yeah.
And with you externally processing, to me, that can sometimes be system overload. And that's just more information for me to internally process. So we kind of had this running joke between the two of us. Our strengths work really, really well together.
They do.
And our weaknesses also work really well together, but to our detriment. So anyway, I'll stop.
And we have like cute names too that we now like say to lighten it up a bit. And so if I'm claws are out, it's like Krabby Cakes is out, Krabby K. Like that's what's happening. And then with you, it's like being Flapjack. Just being Flapjack. It's just lightens it up a bit. So, but in putting all this into practice, it's really impacted our relationship a lot. I know for me, I do feel like we understand each other more. Like you said, understand how each other processes information. And there's this, it's just like, it's light, there's a lightness to it, and we don't harp. It's not heaviness that like carries with you through the days. So yeah, how do you feel like it's impacted us?
When we communicate, whether we're in a state of complete and total alignment and connection, or when we're not, our words are precise. They can clearly call out an issue, and they offer a more distinct and definable roadmap to becoming one in alignment again.
Beautiful.
And I think that goes very well with the scripture that I see written down in the notes that you have. So do you want to read that real quick?
Sure. Yeah. So in Romans 8, also just Romans 8 in general, it's just great. But Romans 8 verse 6 says, to set the mind on the flesh is death, but to set the mind on the spirit is life and peace. And so when thinking about just the impact of implying in, what's the word? Applying, and the word is not coming to me, but applying space and grace as a strategy. When we don't do that, it just leads to death. It really does, and death may be a harsh word, but it's the truth. A marriage is meant to flourish, to grow. It's a gift from God.
It's life-giving.
It is life-giving, right? And so when we're not walking in the Spirit, it's decay. It's decaying in the marriage. But when we are setting our mind on the Spirit and reconnecting, and during those times of space, we're also speaking with the Lord and having Him and Jesus intercede for us to then bring us back into a connection to regulate. It's life and peace, and that's what He offers. And so that's just we do pray that this practice will create life and peace in your marriens and 100%. In your relationships. Because this also applies to everybody in any relationship, but specifically with a marriage, we both have found it so powerful. So yeah.
Absolutely. And I think another thing that I've noticed is we don't tend to walk on eggshells around each other anymore. And if walking on eggshells is a pretty common phrase, but I'll just define it. It's this walking into a room and just your heart kind of flares up a little bit when you see your spouse.
Or your stomach turns.
You feel a little flushed. There's actually a really great book out there. I forget what it's called.
I think it's Stop Walking on Eggshells.
Yes. It was written by a female author, I think.
Yeah. Is this going to be one in the show notes?
Potentially. But while you're looking that up, I want to make a comment on another thing I've noticed. And when you have it, just feel free to read it out. But there is this thing called mutually assured destruction. They use it in nuclear deterrence, but I think it actually applies to relationships as well. It's like, and I wrote it down in here, understanding your MAD patterns, mutually assured destructive patterns, because I know if I start to withdraw, she's going to want to get the claws out.
Yeah.
I know if you get the claws out, I'm going to want to withdraw. And you have to walk through those moments of discomfort. I have to, when her claws are out, I have to intentionally let them latch on to me. And when I feel like I want to withdraw, I have to intentionally say, no, I'm not going to withdraw. I'm going to be fully present, and I'm going to lean in and listen with intention and listen for understanding for my spouse. And so I think just be aware of those mutually assured destructive patterns in your life and for your spouse.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I love that. Yeah, I was curious what that term meant because I don't know things about the military or any war terms.
I don't either. I thought it was a catchy thing.
Yeah, no, it's really great. So, yeah, because we are there. Yeah, we are here to make these marriages grow and flourish and be all that God created them to be. And so I found the book.
Oh, you did? Awesome.
It is also something, I think I've listened to a couple of the chapters. So we haven't read this book, but fully, but heard about it, had a lot of friends, a lot of therapists talk about it. It's called Stop Walking on Eggshells. And it is by Paul T. Mason and Randy Krieger with a K. Krieger. Great book. So highly recommended to us, but also something that, and it is more around like different personality disorders too, but some of the practices are like very applicable to anyone who may or may not have that in their relationship. So yeah, it's really great. But does that wrap up our lesson for today?
It seems so formal. Yeah, it seems so formal lesson. More like just
thinking of all the lessons we were talking about. This wasn't even. This is kind of its own thing. But
this wraps up our discussion.
Discussion.
Oh
my gosh.
We're professionals at this.
Professionism.
I need to make that into a shirt or something, or like a hat.
I know it could be part of our little bloopers. But cool.
Yeah, well, we want to thank you for being here this week. It's truly a delight just to share our experience with you. And hey, I hope you have an amazing day, an amazing week, and we will see you next time.
Yeah. Bye.